Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when we are forced to confront pain, loss, and betrayal. These are inevitable parts of the human experience, and yet there is a particular kind of hurt that cuts deeper than any other. The hurt that comes from someone who has damaged you intentionally. The kind of harm that isn't an accident, a mistake, or a fleeting lapse in judgment. No, this is something far more deliberate. It is the kind of injury inflicted with full knowledge of its consequences, the kind that leaves lasting scars, not just on the body, but on the soul. When someone hurts you on purpose, they are making a decision. And that decision, that choice, speaks volumes about who they are. It says that, at that moment, your well-being didn't matter to them. You, your feelings, your trust, none of it held any value. It's a betrayal not just of your trust, but of your personhood. It's a violation of what should be an unspoken pact between us all, that we treat each other with decency, respect, and care. The wounds from intentional harm aren't like the ones that heal in time. They don't fade quickly, and the scars left behind are not mere memories. They're reminders of a moment when someone crossed a line that should never have been crossed. These are wounds that echo in your thoughts, whispering doubts about your worth, your value, and your ability to trust again. It's not just the hurt we feel in that moment, it's what follows. It's the psychological toll, the erosion of self-esteem, and the hollowing of peace of mind. It's the emotional manipulation that chips away at our foundations. The mind becomes clouded by confusion, by questions of why they would choose to harm us, of what we could have done differently. But the truth is simple. You didn't deserve it, and no amount of reflection or self-blame will change that. Yet we are often told, in society, that forgiveness is the way forward. We are urged to let go, to move past the pain, to extend that sacred second chance. But let me ask you this. Should we forgive someone who has intentionally damaged us, only to expose ourselves to the same hurt again? Is forgiveness the same as opening the door to repeat damage? Is it truly an act of grace to allow someone to walk back into our lives after they have shown us who they really are? Not once, but twice. Trust, once broken, is not easily rebuilt. It's fragile, like glass. When it shatters, no matter how carefully you try to piece it together, it will never be the same. It will always bear the marks of that break, that fracture. And so when someone intentionally hurts you, they leave a permanent mark on the trust you once had for them. The foundation of your relationship has been eroded, and trust, the very thing that holds us together, can never be restored to its original state. Not by words, not by promises, not by actions that were once taken for granted. It is gone. So, what are we to do in the face of this betrayal? How do we move forward? The answer is not to cling to false hope that things can be the way they were. The answer is to walk away, to protect yourself from future harm, and to understand that by leaving, by refusing to give them that second chance, you are not giving up. You are empowering yourself. You are taking back control of your own narrative. You are no longer a victim to someone else's choices. You see, there is great strength in walking away from harm. It is not weakness to refuse a second chance to someone who has intentionally damaged you. It is, in fact, one of the most powerful acts of self-preservation you can commit. You are choosing to protect your peace, your dignity, and your future. You are saying that you will no longer allow yourself to be diminished by another's choices. There is no obligation to offer a second chance to someone who has shown you who they are with their actions. You owe them nothing but the knowledge that your worth is not tied to their ability to respect it. You owe them nothing but the courage to walk away, to close the door on a chapter that has already been written in pain and disappointment. And in that decision, you reclaim your power. You reclaim your peace. You reclaim your future. There are moments in life when we encounter an undeniable truth. Pain is an inseparable part of being human. It's woven into the fabric of our existence, inevitable and unyielding. We all experience it in various forms: loss, disappointment, rejection. But there is one form of pain that stands apart from the others. It is a pain that lingers longer, cuts deeper, and changes us more profoundly. I'm talking about the pain of betrayal. The kind of pain that occurs when someone you trust, someone you have allowed into the most sacred spaces of your life, chooses to harm you intentionally. This is not the hurt that comes from misunderstanding or accidental injury. This is the cold, calculated damage inflicted with full knowledge of the consequences. It's a wound that is not inflicted by chance, but by a deliberate act. And it is this kind of hurt that is the most insidious, for it carries with it the realization that the person who harmed you knew exactly what they were doing. They knew the weight of their actions. They knew the impact it would have on you, and yet they chose to hurt you anyway. It is one thing to experience pain because life simply unfolds in ways we cannot control. We all, at some point, find ourselves on the receiving end of life's harsh realities. But it is an entirely different matter when that pain comes at the hands of someone who should have been your ally, your confidant, your protector. When the harm is intentional, it changes the very nature of the injury. It becomes personal. It is no longer just an unfortunate part of life. It is an active decision by someone to inflict harm. It is a rejection of you, your worth, and your trust. It is an act of disregard for the bond that once existed between you and the person who now chooses to break it. The worst part about this kind of betrayal is the silent question it leaves behind. Why? Why would someone who knows your heart, who has been given a place in your life, choose to hurt you deliberately? Why would they break what you've built together? It is a question that often goes unanswered, and it is this unanswered question that keeps the wound fresh. It is not just the action itself that damages us, but the realization that someone we trusted would willingly choose to break us, to destroy the foundation we once stood on together. And that, my friends, is the real heartbreak. It's the shattering of the belief that those we love, those we have opened ourselves to, will treat us with care and kindness. When that trust is violated, it leaves us questioning our own judgment, our own sense of self-worth, and whether we can ever truly trust again. And while the pain may be temporary in some cases, the after effects are long-lasting. For when someone intentionally hurts you, they leave a scar that may not be visible to others, but it is always there, reminding you of the betrayal you endured. Intentional harm is unlike any other kind of injury we might encounter in life. It is not the product of a momentary lapse in judgment or the unfortunate consequence of circumstances beyond anyone's control. No. Intentional harm is a calculated act. It is a decision made with full awareness of the damage it will cause, and it carries with it an undeniable weight, a mark of premeditation. When someone harms you intentionally, they are making a choice that disregards your well-being, your emotions, and the trust you placed in them. There is no excuse for this kind of harm, no justification that can make it seem any less deliberate. It is an action rooted in selfishness, cruelty, or indifference, with a clear understanding that it will hurt you. And that knowledge, that conscious decision to cause pain, makes it all the more painful. When we think of harm, we often think of physical injury, a cut, a bruise, something that can be seen and treated. But the nature of intentional harm is deeper. It's not just about what happens to the body. It's about what happens to the heart, to the mind, to the spirit. When someone chooses to hurt you with intent, they are inflicting a wound that goes beyond the surface. The damage is emotional, psychological, and sometimes even existential. It shakes you to your core, and it challenges everything you thought you knew about the person who caused it. You may find yourself questioning what went wrong, why they would choose to hurt you, and what that says about your relationship with them. This kind of harm doesn't just leave you with a momentary sting. It leaves you with confusion, anger, and often a deep sense of loss. The intentionality behind the harm only amplifies the damage. It is one thing for someone to hurt you unknowingly or by mistake, for that pain may be mitigated by the understanding that no malice was involved. But when someone sets out to hurt you, when they plan it, when they execute it with purpose, it is an assault on your very sense of safety. The foundation of trust that once existed between you and that person is shattered. And it is not just about the immediate damage done. It's about the aftermath, the long-term effects. A person who intentionally harms you reveals a side of themselves that cannot be easily forgotten. They show you their capacity for cruelty or disregard, and it becomes a question of whether they will ever truly care for you in the same way again. The damage is not just in the act itself, but in what it says about the nature of that person. They have made a choice to treat you in a way that undermines your dignity, your respect, and your humanity. What makes this kind of harm so devastating is the knowledge that it could have been avoided. The person who chose to hurt you could have chosen kindness, or at the very least, they could have chosen to walk away rather than cause pain. But they didn't. And that lack of regard for your feelings, that conscious decision to hurt you, is something that lingers long after the incident. It leaves you wondering if it was a fluke or a glimpse into who they really are. It casts doubt on your ability to trust others, and in some cases, even yourself. And the hardest truth of all is that this kind of harm is not something that can be easily undone. There are no words, no actions that can simply erase the decision someone made to hurt you intentionally. It is a scar that remains, a reminder that in this world there are those who, for reasons known only to them, will choose to wound rather than heal. And that realization that someone who once meant something to you has willingly inflicted pain upon you is a truth that takes time to fully accept. The emotional and psychological toll of intentional harm is profound and far-reaching. Unlike physical injuries that may heal over time, the wounds inflicted on our hearts and minds often linger long after the event. These are not scars that fade with the passage of days or weeks, but rather ones that remain, etched deeply into the fabric of our emotional well-being. The damage done by someone who harms us intentionally isn't just about the initial shock or hurt. It's about the way it reshapes our sense of self, our perception of others, and how we view the world. It alters the very lens through which we experience life, leaving us to navigate a new reality where trust is harder to give and vulnerability becomes a risk. When someone intentionally harms you, they don't just damage a relationship or an interaction, They target something far more delicate, your sense of security and belonging. You feel betrayed not only by the person who hurt you, but by the world itself. If someone you trusted, someone you allowed close to you, can choose to hurt you with such cruelty, what does that say about the safety of the world around you? It creates a pervasive sense of doubt, of fear that others may be just as capable of betrayal, whether or not they show it. And this fear, this erosion of trust, is one of the most insidious effects of intentional harm. It seeps into every aspect of life, from the way you relate to family and friends, to how you engage in new relationships. The fear of being hurt again becomes a constant companion, and even when no harm is intended, you might find yourself bracing for the impact of an injury that hasn't yet come. The psychological toll is equally heavy. Emotional pain caused by deliberate harm doesn't just make us feel sad or angry, it undermines our entire sense of self-worth. The longer the emotional damage lingers, the more it chips away at our confidence, making us question our judgment, our ability to trust, and sometimes even our value as individuals. When someone intentionally harms us, they make us doubt whether we are worthy of respect, whether we deserve love or loyalty. The damage they cause isn't just about the immediate impact of their actions. It seeps into the deep recesses of our minds, festering and growing into self-doubt and insecurity. What they have done to us becomes a mirror, reflecting back a version of ourselves that feels smaller, less deserving, and less capable of receiving good things. End of story 2. This internalization of harm can often lead to a downward spiral of negative thinking, where we begin to question everything about ourselves, our decisions, our worth, and even our right to happiness. The psychological aftermath also often includes feelings of guilt, despite the fact that we are the ones who were wronged. When we are harmed by someone we trusted, our minds may try to rationalize the pain, asking questions like, "What did I do wrong?" or "How could I have prevented this?" This internal questioning is a defense mechanism, an attempt to make sense of the chaos and confusion that comes with betrayal. But sometimes it's alien. But in reality, the harm was never our fault. It wasn't something we could have stopped or anticipated. It was a choice made by someone else. And yet, our minds tend to carry the burden of that choice, blaming ourselves for something that was never within our control. This guilt can cloud our judgment and keep us stuck in a cycle of rumination, preventing us from healing and moving forward. Moreover, the pain of intentional harm is not something we can easily compartmentalize. It doesn't just stay in one corner of our lives where we can ignore it or push it aside. It bleeds into our everyday existence, influencing how we see ourselves in the world. Our relationships become strained because we begin to see potential harm in every encounter. We find ourselves guarding our emotions, closing ourselves off from those who want to help, out of fear that they too may betray us. And this emotional and psychological weight, when carried alone for too long, can lead to a sense of isolation. We begin to withdraw, to feel like no one truly understands the depth of what we've been through. And as a result, the healing process becomes even more difficult. In short, the emotional and psychological toll of intentional harm is far more than just the aftermath of an event. It is a transformation, a shift in how we view ourselves, others, and the world around us. The damage done by someone who chooses to harm us intentionally becomes a burden we must carry, a weight that can feel unbearable at times. But the most insidious part of this toll is that it is often invisible. The scars of betrayal are not always visible to others, and so we are left to suffer in silence, unable to share the full extent of what we have endured. Yet, despite all of this, the true tragedy lies not in the pain we endure, but in the fact that it was all avoidable. The harm was not necessary, and it was never something we deserved. And it was never something we deserved. When we are wronged by someone, particularly when that harm is intentional, we are often confronted with a question that seems simple at first, but is anything but. Should we forgive? Forgiveness is a concept that has been taught to us in so many ways, from religious texts to philosophical teachings to social norms, that it has become almost synonymous with moral superiority. We are encouraged to forgive those who hurt us, to extend grace to those who have wronged us, and to let go of the bitterness that can eat away at our peace. On the surface, forgiveness seems like the noble path, the path that leads to healing, reconciliation, and ultimately freedom. But what happens when forgiveness means risking yourself again? What happens when, in the name of forgiveness, we are asked to open ourselves up to the possibility of further harm? The tension between forgiveness and self-preservation is not one that can be answered lightly, and it is a struggle that many of us must face when we've been intentionally damaged by someone we once trusted. Forgiveness, in its most pure form, is a choice. It is an act of releasing the hold that anger, resentment, and hurt have over us. It is the decision to free ourselves from the emotional prison that pain can create. Yet, forgiveness can also become a trap if it is forced upon us before we are ready. When we are hurt intentionally, particularly by someone close to us, forgiveness can feel like an obligation, a moral duty to be the better person. We are told that forgiveness is the only way to heal, that by forgiving we release ourselves from the chains of anger and bitterness. But this advice often overlooks one very important fact. Healing begins with self-preservation, not self-sacrifice. Sometimes, in order to protect ourselves, we must first acknowledge the damage done and take steps to ensure we are not vulnerable to further harm. The reality is that forgiveness is a complex and deeply personal journey, and it is not always the best or healthiest option in every situation. For some, forgiving someone who has intentionally hurt them can feel like an act of betrayal to themselves. How can we forgive someone who has not only chosen to hurt us, but has done so knowingly and repeatedly? To forgive in such cases might feel like an invitation to repeat the cycle of harm, to allow someone the space to hurt us again, to diminish our sense of self-worth. In these situations, self-preservation becomes paramount. Protecting your heart, your mind, your sense of dignity. These things are not just essential, they are non-negotiable. Sometimes, in order to preserve who we are and to safeguard our future, forgiveness must take a back seat. The decision to protect yourself may not feel like the righteous path, but it is often the only path that leads to true healing. Forgiving someone who has damaged us intentionally does not erase the truth of what they've done. It doesn't change the fact that they made a choice to hurt us, and it doesn't undo the damage they caused. Forgiveness cannot be a cure-all, nor can it be a shield against future harm. At its core, forgiveness is about letting go of the grip that the wrongdoer's actions have on our hearts, but it should never come at the expense of our own well-being. Sometimes, the kindest and most compassionate thing we can do for ourselves is to recognize that self-preservation takes precedence. It is okay to walk away, to choose not to forgive, or to choose forgiveness on your own terms. not because you owe it to anyone else, but because it is the only way to honor your own healing process. We must also confront the idea that self-preservation and forgiveness are not always mutually exclusive. It is possible to forgive in your heart, to let go of the anger and bitterness that weigh you down, while still protecting yourself from further harm. Forgiveness doesn't have to mean re-entering a toxic relationship or allowing someone to continue damaging you so that there has already been slammed shut, or allowing someone to continue damaging you. You can forgive without offering another opportunity for that person to hurt you again. Forgiveness, in this sense, becomes an internal peace, a release from the emotional burden, without any expectation that the person who harmed you will change or make amends. It becomes a tool of liberation, not reconciliation. Ultimately, the struggle between forgiveness and self-preservation is not a dichotomy. It is a process. It's a matter of finding balance, of understanding that our own safety and emotional well-being must come first, even as we work through the complexities of forgiveness. In some situations, the greatest act of forgiveness is not the one we extend to others, but the one we extend to ourselves. The forgiveness of our own hurt, the permission to protect our hearts from further damage, and the choice to move forward on our own terms. This is where true healing begins. And if, along the way, we find that forgiveness is the right path for us, we will do so with a sense of agency, not obligation. It will be a choice we make for our own peace, not as a means to placate someone else's needs or expectations. In the end, the most important thing we can do is to protect ourselves, body, mind, and soul, and to honor the process of healing in whatever form it takes. Trust is a fragile thing. It is the cornerstone of every meaningful relationship, whether personal, professional, or otherwise. Trust is what binds us to one another, allowing us to share our vulnerabilities, our hopes, and our fears. It's the invisible thread that holds everything together, creating a foundation of mutual respect, understanding, and safety. But when that trust is broken, when someone we relied upon betrays us, the damage is far deeper than a mere rupture in a relationship. It is the shattering of a core belief we hold about the world and ourselves. And unlike other types of harm, broken trust doesn't just heal with time. It requires something far more difficult: effort, reconciliation, and the slow, painstaking work of rebuilding what was once lost. She nodded. The moment trust is broken, everything changes. The bond between two people, once built on an understanding that was largely unspoken, becomes tainted with doubt. That seamless connection, where you once felt safe and secure, becomes riddled with cracks, making it impossible to believe that the relationship will ever return to its former state. Even if the person who betrayed you expresses regret or asks for forgiveness, it is not so simple. They have shown you through their actions that they were capable of doing something you never imagined they could. And once that truth is laid bare, it is not something that can be easily erased or ignored. Trust, once broken, leaves a scar, and the scar doesn't fade just because someone asks for another chance. The emotional weight of that betrayal lingers, and it becomes increasingly difficult to erase the image of the damage that was done. Rebuilding trust is not just about convincing someone to believe in you again. It's about proving through consistent actions that you are worthy of that belief. It is a slow, delicate process, one that requires patience, sincerity, and vulnerability. And even with all of these elements in place, there is no guarantee that trust can ever be fully restored. When you've been betrayed, you are left to grapple with a fundamental question: can I trust this person again? Finally, the answer, unfortunately, is not always clear. Trust is not a mere promise or a set of well-meaning words. It is a deep-seated belief, forged over time through actions, consistency, and understanding. When that belief is shattered, the pieces don't simply fall back into place like a puzzle waiting to be reassembled. The pieces are forever altered. You may rebuild the structure of the relationship, but the foundation will never be the same. Moreover, the emotional toll of having your trust broken extends far beyond the immediate harm caused by the betrayal. It influences how you view other people and the world at large. You may find yourself questioning the intentions of others, second-guessing every word, every gesture, and every action. You may begin to wonder if all relationships are susceptible to the same betrayals. If every person, no matter how close, is capable of breaking your trust. This creeping doubt can become a barrier, preventing you from forming new connections or fully investing in the ones you have. The fear of being hurt again looms large, casting a shadow over every interaction. It can turn even the most innocent of exchanges into an emotional minefield, where every misstep feels like a potential betrayal. The longer trust remains broken, the more it affects not just your relationship with the person who betrayed you, but your relationship with yourself. You begin to question your judgment. How did I not see this coming? Why did I ignore the red flags? What does this say about my ability to trust anyone in the future? These questions can erode your confidence and lead to a deep sense of self-doubt. The ability to trust yourself, to believe that you can make good decisions and protect your heart from harm, becomes just as fractured as the trust you placed in someone else. Rebuilding trust, therefore, is not simply about waiting for the passage of time or hoping that the person who betrayed you will change. It is about coming to terms with the reality that what has been broken may never return to its original form. Trust, once shattered, can be repaired, but the process is not guaranteed to restore it to what it once was. It requires a commitment from both parties, and even then, there may always be a lingering awareness that something has been lost. Something that can never be fully regained. The bond may evolve, may adapt to the new reality, but it will always bear the mark of what happened. See, this is not to say that rebuilding trust is impossible. It is certainly possible, but it is not easy, nor is it quick. It requires transparency, time, and a consistent demonstration that the betrayal was an anomaly, not a reflection of the person's character. But the key truth here is this: trust, once broken, is incredibly difficult to rebuild, because it isn't just a matter of words. It's a matter of feeling safe, feeling seen, and believing that the person you trust will not hurt you again. And when that belief is shattered, even the most sincere apologies may not be enough. Rebuilding trust requires not just promises, but proof. Evidence, over time, that the person who betrayed you has truly changed and is worthy of your trust once more. But even then, the process is fraught with uncertainty and emotional strain, and no matter how much effort is invested, the reality is that some things, once broken, cannot be returned to their original form, and that in itself is one of the greatest tragedies of betrayal. Moving on is often viewed as a daunting task, especially after experiencing betrayal, harm, or loss. It can feel impossible to release the grip that these painful memories have on us. There's a temptation to hold on to the past, to relive the hurt over and over, as if by doing so we might somehow make sense of it, or maybe even reverse the damage. But what we fail to recognize in these moments is that holding on to the past doesn't just keep us tethered to the pain. It prevents us from stepping into a future that is free of that weight. The importance of moving on, of letting go of the past and reclaiming our power, cannot be overstated. It is not just about healing, it's about taking back control over our own lives, our emotions, and our future. When we cling to the hurt, we allow it to define us. We allow the actions of others to dictate how we feel about ourselves, how we view the world, and how we move through life. This victim mentality, the idea that we are at the mercy of what has happened to us, robs us of our agency. It places us in a position where we are no longer in control of our own narrative, where we allow the harm done to us to take up more space in our lives than it deserves. But when we choose to move on, when we choose to let go of the past and all the emotional baggage it carries, we are choosing to reclaim our power. We are no longer bound by what others have done to us. We are free to define who we are, independent of the betrayals and harms that once tried to break us. Reclaiming power doesn't mean forgetting or excusing the hurt. It doesn't mean pretending that the damage wasn't real or that it didn't affect us. Moving on is not about minimizing the significance of what happened. It's about deciding that we will no longer allow it to have power over us. When we hold on to the past, when we refuse to let go of the hurt, we give the person or the situation that caused us pain the power to dictate how we feel, how we react, and how we approach life. But when we decide to move forward, we take that power back. We regain control over our emotions and our actions. We free ourselves from the shackles of anger, resentment, and fear. And we give ourselves the chance to live in a way that is not defined by past hurts. This process of reclaiming power is not instantaneous, nor is it easy. It requires courage, self-compassion, and the willingness to embrace discomfort. Moving on doesn't mean we suddenly feel better or that we magically forget the pain. It means that we start to reframe our experiences, to view them as part of our story, but not the whole story. We stop allowing the past to dominate our thoughts and emotions. We begin to focus on the present, on what we can control now, and on what we can build for the future. In this way, we take back the reins of our lives, rather than being dragged along by the memories of betrayal or hurt. Footnote: moreover, moving on is an act of self-love. It's a recognition that we deserve more than to be held captive by the actions of others. We deserve the freedom to live fully without being haunted by past wounds. When we refuse to move on, when we continue to hold on to the pain, we are essentially saying that we are not worthy of peace, that we are not deserving of happiness. But when we let go, we affirm our own worth. We say, I am worthy of healing, of peace, and of a future that is not shaped by this hurt. And in that process, we give ourselves the gift of reclaiming not only our power, but also our dignity and our strength. This is where moving on also opens the door to new possibilities. It allows us to step out of the shadows of the past and into the light of the present. It's an act of liberation, of freeing ourselves from the emotional burdens that have weighed us down for far too long. It allows us to open our hearts to new experiences, to embrace new relationships, and to move forward with the confidence that we are capable of creating a future that is better than the past. We are no longer defined by what has been done to us, but by the choices we make now. By choosing to move on, we are telling ourselves that we are not prisoners to our past, that we are not defined by the hurt we've experienced. We are free to create a new narrative, a narrative where we are in control. The importance of moving on is also about personal growth. Every challenge, every betrayal, every painful moment in our lives presents an opportunity for growth, but only if we allow it. When we cling to the past, we prevent ourselves from growing. We get stuck in a loop of pain and resentment, unable to move forward, unable to learn the lessons that are waiting for us. But when we choose to move on, we allow ourselves the space to evolve. We learn to be stronger, wiser, and more resilient. We learn that we are capable of overcoming even the most painful experiences, and that, ultimately, we are the ones who hold the power to shape our own lives. Moving on is not about denying the pain or pretending that it didn't matter. It is about recognizing that while the past has shaped us, it does not have to define us. The true power lies in our ability to decide that we will not be held back any longer. We will not allow the actions of others to have control over our future. We will choose to reclaim our power, to heal, and to move forward. And in doing so, we take back ownership of our lives, our happiness, and our future. In conclusion, the journey through betrayal, intentional harm, and emotional damage is a complex and deeply personal one. It challenges us, reshapes us, and forces us to confront not only the hurt caused by others, but also the limits of our own strength and resilience. Yet, throughout this process, there is a powerful truth that remains. We have the agency to reclaim our lives, our trust, and our power. Time again. The key to healing lies not in clinging to the past, but in understanding that moving on is not about forgetting or excusing what has happened. It is about choosing to take control, to rebuild our sense of self, and to protect ourselves from further harm. Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild, but it is not beyond repair. And sometimes the greatest act of healing is knowing when to walk away, to preserve our dignity, and to prioritize our well-being. Forgiveness, though powerful, should never come at the expense of self-preservation. And above all, we must remember that the damage others have inflicted upon us does not define who we are. We are not the sum of our betrayals or scars. Moving on, reclaiming our power, and choosing to live free from the weight of past harm is the path to true healing. It is a choice to live not as victims, but as empowered individuals, ready to embrace the future with strength, clarity, and purpose. And it is in this choice, the choice to move forward, that we ultimately find our freedom and our peace.